The termination letter was still warm from the printer when security escorted me out of the building. 2 cardboard boxes containing 7 years of my life, carried like evidence of a crime. My colleagues avoided eye contact as I passed their desks, some whispering behind cupped hands, others pretending to be absorbed in their screens. The lobby's marble floor reflected my shame back at me with every step, and I remember thinking how fitting it was that even my own reflection looked distorted and broken. I'd built my entire identity around being the youngest senior analyst at Whitmore & Associates, the financial firm where dreams supposedly came true if you worked hard enough. That morning, I'd been publicly accused of insider trading, fired on the spot, and watched my professional reputation crumble in less than an hour. By noon, my name was trending on financial Twitter, accompanied by words like disgrace, corrupt, and another millennial who thought she could cheat the system. The security guard wouldn't even hold the door for me. I struggled with my boxes while my former boss, Richard Whitmore himself, watched from the mezzanine above, his expression unreadable behind those wire-rimmed glasses that had intimidated me since my first day. Next to him stood Victoria Chen, my former mentor, the woman who'd promised to guide my career. She was already wearing the blazer I'd seen her eyeing in the executive boutique downstairs, the one she'd joked she'd buy when she got my promotion. 3 days later, when the journalist called, I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers had been harassing me since the story broke. But something about the third ring felt different, like fate clearing its throat before speaking. When I finally picked up, a woman's voice, gentle but determined, said words that would change everything. "Ms. Sarah Coleman, my name is Diana Price from the Herald Tribune. I don't think you're guilty, and I'd like to hear your side of the story. If you're watching this, and you've ever been falsely accused, ever been thrown under the bus by people you trusted, ever watched your life's work get destroyed in minutes while the real criminals smiled from their corner offices, then please stay with me. Because what happened next isn't just my vindication story. It's proof that sometimes the truth has a way of finding its voice, even when powerful people try to silence it. Like and share this if you believe everyone deserves their day in court, not just in law, but in life. My name is Sarah Coleman, though for a while there, the internet knew me by other names. I was 24 when everything fell apart, young enough to believe that hard work and integrity would always win, old enough to know better by the time the dust settled. I grew up in a small apartment in Queens, raised by my grandmother, after my parents died in a car accident when I was 9. Grandma Ruth was a force of nature, a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put my mother through college, only to lose her to a drunk driver before she could see her grandchild graduate. She used to tell me, "Sarah, honey, in this world, you've got 2 choices. You can let life happen to you, or you can happen to life. The Coleman women, we happen to life." She'd say this while hemming other people's clothes for extra money, her fingers never stopping even when her arthritis made her wince. She taught me that dignity wasn't about what others thought of you. It was about knowing your own worth when the world tried to convince you otherwise. I'd gotten into Whitmore & Associates straight out of NYU, where I'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance and a minor in data analytics. It wasn't Harvard or Wharton, but I'd turned down those acceptance letters because NYU offered a full scholarship, and Grandma Ruth needed help with her medical bills. Richard Whitmore himself had interviewed me, impressed by a predictive model I developed for my senior thesis that could identify market manipulation patterns with 94% accuracy. "You remind me of myself at your age," he'd said during that interview, leaning back in his leather chair that probably cost more than my annual rent. Hungry, smart, not afraid to challenge conventional thinking. He'd hired me on the spot, and I'd walked out of that office feeling like I'd won the lottery. If only I'd known that lottery tickets sometimes come with invisible strings attached. My first year at the firm was everything I'd dreamed it would be. I worked 18-hour days without complaint, slept on the office couch more nights than I care to remember, and slowly earned the respect of colleagues who'd initially dismissed me as Whitmore's charity case. That's what they called me behind my back. I heard it in the bathroom stalls, saw it in deleted Slack messages that briefly flashed on shared screens. The girl from Queens who didn't belong in their world of country clubs and trust funds. Victoria Chen changed that, or so I thought. She was everything I aspired to be. Brilliant, confident, impeccably dressed, with a corner office and a reputation for turning junior analysts into stars. She'd started mentoring me in my second year, taking me to client dinners, including me in high-level meetings, teaching me how to navigate the unwritten rules of corporate politics. "You're too honest, Sarah," she'd tell me over martinis at the private club where she held court every Thursday. In this world, honesty without strategy is just naivety. You need to learn when to speak and when to stay silent, when to take credit and when to let others shine. It's not about being dishonest. It's about being smart. I absorbed her lessons like a sponge absorbs water, reshaping myself into someone who could play the game. I learned to speak in the confident, slightly dismissive tone that made clients take you seriously. I traded my clearance rack blazers for designer suits bought on payment plans I could barely afford. I even started straightening my naturally curly hair because Victoria mentioned once that professional hair was important for executive presence. The transformation worked. By my third year, I was the youngest senior analyst in the firm's history. My predictive models were saving clients millions, and my name was starting to appear in industry publications. Richard Whitmore would parade me at investor meetings, his hand on my shoulder as he told the story of discovering raw talent and nurturing potential. I was living proof that Whitmore and Associates was a meritocracy, that anyone could make it if they worked hard enough. The cracks started showing in my fifth year. I'd been assigned to analyze a series of acquisitions for our biggest client, Meridian Industries. The numbers weren't adding up. There were patterns in the trading data that suggested someone was manipulating stock prices before each acquisition announcement. The more I dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. This wasn't just insider trading. It was a coordinated scheme that involved multiple parties and had been going on for years. I brought my findings to Victoria first, trusting her to guide me on how to handle such sensitive information. She'd listened carefully, her face grave as I showed her chart after chart of evidence. "This is serious, Sarah," she'd said, taking my files. "Let me look into this quietly. We need to be absolutely certain before we make any accusations. Give me a week." That week, she was different. She invited me to more meetings, introduced me to board members I'd never met, and even hinted that a promotion to junior partner might be in my future. "You're ready for the next level," she'd said at lunch that Friday. "Richard and I have been discussing your trajectory. Big things are coming, Sarah. Big things." I should have known something was wrong when she asked me to sign off on a series of trades the following Monday. "Routine stuff," she'd said, barely looking up from her phone. "Just need your analyst code for the audit trail. You know how compliance is." I'd hesitated, something in my gut warning me, but this was Victoria, my mentor, the woman who'd lifted me from obscurity. I signed. 2 days later, the SEC raided our offices. They came in the morning, men and women in dark suits with boxes and warrants, seizing computers and files. The entire floor watched in shock as they methodically worked through the executive wing. I was in the break room when Richard's assistant, Patricia, found me. Her face was pale, her usually perfect composure cracked. "Mr. Whitmore wants to see you. Now." The walk to his office felt like a death march. Colleagues stared as I passed, already sensing blood in the water. When I entered Richard's office, Victoria was already there, sitting in one of the guest chairs with her legs crossed, looking impossibly calm. Richard stood behind his desk, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Sit," he commanded, and I did, my legs suddenly unable to support me. What followed was a masterclass in corporate assassination. Richard laid out the evidence, trades made under my analyst code that perfectly preceded the Meridian acquisition announcements. Millions of dollars in profits funneled through shadow accounts that somehow traced back to my login credentials. The very patterns I'd discovered were now being presented as my own criminal enterprise. "I trusted you," Richard said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I brought you into this firm, gave you opportunities people would kill for, and this is how you repay me? By using your position to commit fraud?" I tried to explain, to tell him about my investigation, about the evidence I'd found, but Victoria interrupted. "Sarah, please. We have the emails you sent, the encrypted files on your computer. Denying it now only makes things worse." She pulled out a folder, my folder, the one I'd given her, but the documents inside were different, altered. My analysis had been transformed into what looked like a blueprint for insider trading. "These aren't my files," I said, my voice cracking. "Victoria, you know these aren't my files. I gave you my research. Someone is manipulating the data to make it look like you're a criminal?" Richard finished. "Yes, Sarah, that's exactly what it looks like, because that's what you are." The next 30 minutes were a blur. Security was called. I was given 10 minutes to pack my desk under supervision. My company laptop, phone, and keycard were confiscated. As I placed my personal items in boxes, a photo of Grandma Ruth, my NYU diploma, a stress ball shaped like a brain that a secret Santa had given me. I heard Richard on the phone with someone, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "Yes, the evidence is clear. We're cooperating fully with the investigation. Whitmore and Associates has zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. We're shocked and disappointed, but we'll survive this." They were already controlling the narrative, painting themselves as victims of a rogue employee. Me. The charity case from Queens, who'd gotten too greedy, too ambitious, who'd thought she could outsmart the system. As security escorted me out, I passed Victoria in the hallway. For just a moment our eyes met, and I saw something flicker in hers. Not guilt exactly, but acknowledgement. She knew what she'd done, she knew I knew, and she knew there was nothing I could do about it. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, Sarah," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "I really thought you were different." The elevator ride down felt endless, 37 floors of descent, each one taking me further from the life I'd built. The security guards flanked me like I was a dangerous criminal, their faces impassive as other employees entered and quickly exited the elevator, not wanting to be contaminated by association. In the lobby, I saw my reflection in those marble floors one last time. I looked exactly like what I was, a young woman carrying boxes of failure, surrounded by guards, watched by every person in that gleaming corporate cathedral. Someone was already filming on their phone. By the time I reached the street, I was probably already on social media. The next 3 days were the darkest of my life. The story exploded across financial media with headlines like "Young Analyst's Greed Topples Career" and "Whitmore and Associates Uncovers Internal Fraud." My LinkedIn inbox filled with messages from former colleagues distancing themselves from me. My NYU Alumni Association sent a carefully worded email suggesting I might want to temporarily suspend my participation in their mentorship program. I couldn't leave my apartment. Reporters camped outside my building, shouting questions whenever someone entered or exited. "Sarah, did you act alone? How much money did you steal? Do you have a statement for your victims?" My landlord slipped a note under my door suggesting I might want to explore other housing options when my lease ended the following month. Grandma Ruth called every hour, her voice worried but steady. "Baby, I don't care what they're saying. I know who you are. You come home if you need to. These people don't deserve you anyway." But I couldn't go home. I couldn't face her, couldn't bear to see the disappointment in her eyes, even if she claimed it wasn't there. The Coleman women were supposed to happen to life, not be crushed by it. I spent those 3 days in a haze of disbelief and rage, poring over every document I had saved on my personal drives, trying to find something, anything, that could prove my innocence. But Victoria had been thorough. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered was gone from my personal cloud storage, replaced with fabricated documents that supported their narrative. Even my email history had been somehow altered. Conversations I'd never had, messages I'd never sent, all bearing my digital signature. On the third night, I stood on my fire escape, looking out at the city lights, and wondered if this was how people disappeared. Not dramatically, but slowly, erased by systems too big to fight, crushed by people too powerful to challenge. I thought about every whistleblower I'd read about, every person who'd tried to do the right thing only to be destroyed for it. Was this my fate? To be a cautionary tale whispered about in business schools? That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I'd been ignoring them all day. Reporters, cranks, people who'd found my number online and wanted to tell me exactly what they thought of me. But something made me answer this one. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just the fact that I had nothing left to lose. Ms. Coleman? Please don't hang up. My name is Diana Price from the Herald Tribune. I've been investigating Whitmore & Associates for 2 years, and I think you've been set up. I almost laughed. You and nobody else. I'm serious, Diana continued, her voice urgent but kind. I've been tracking suspicious trading patterns connected to Meridian Industries long before you supposedly started this scheme. I have sources, documents, recordings, but I've never had someone from inside Whitmore who could confirm my suspicions. Until now. I can't confirm anything, I said, sinking onto my couch. They destroyed everything, changed my files, altered my emails. I look guilty even to myself at this point. But you know the truth, Diana pressed. And sometimes, Miss Coleman, the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when the lies are this elaborate. I'd like to meet with you, hear your story, all of it. Why would you believe me when no one else does? There was a pause, then Diana said something that made me sit up straight. Because 3 years ago, they did the same thing to my partner at our financial desk. He killed himself 6 months later. I've been hunting them ever since. We met the next morning at a diner in Brooklyn, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. Diana was older than she sounded on the phone, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes and the kind of tired determination you see in people who've been fighting losing battles for too long. She slid a folder across the table before I'd even ordered. Look at this. Inside were photographs, documents, trading records going back 5 years. Pattern after pattern of suspicious activity, all centered around Meridian Industries and all somehow benefiting a select group of Whitmore executives, including Victoria Chen. She's been doing this since before you even joined the firm, Diana explained, her finger tracing the timeline. Look at these trades. Same pattern, same timing, different analyst codes. You're the 4th analyst to be fired for insider trading in 7 years. Did you know that? I hadn't. My research into the company before joining had shown nothing but sterling reputations and industry awards. They scrub it clean, Diana continued. Every time, the analyst gets publicly destroyed, takes the fall, and usually settles out of court with an NDA that keeps them quiet forever. Meanwhile, the real perpetrators keep profiting. Your predecessor, Marcus Huang, he's teaching English in South Korea now. Couldn't get another finance job anywhere. The one before him, Jennifer Walsh, last I heard she was working at her father's hardware store in Ohio. So why didn't you publish this before? I asked, my hands shaking as I held the documents. Because I had no proof that would stand up against their lawyers. Patterns aren't enough. Suspicions aren't enough. I needed someone who could walk me through the inside, show me how they actually do it. Someone who'd seen the mechanism up close. She leaned forward. Sarah, you found something, didn't you? Before they framed you. That's why they had to get rid of you. I told her everything, about the analysis I'd done, the patterns I'd discovered, how I'd trusted Victoria with the information, how she'd manipulated me into signing off on those trades. Diana recorded every word, occasionally asking for clarification or more detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. They got sloppy this time, she finally said. Victoria must have been in a hurry. There are inconsistencies in their story, timestamps that don't match, digital footprints they didn't quite cover. But Sarah, I need more. I need you to help me understand their system from the inside. Every detail you can remember about how trades were processed, how documents were handled, who had access to what. I don't know if I can, I admitted. They have all the power. They've already destroyed me. What if they come after Grandma Ruth? What if we stop them? Diana interrupted. What if we make sure you're the last person they do this to? Sarah, I know you're scared. I know you feel alone, but you're not. There are more of us than you think. People they've wronged, people who've been watching, waiting for the right moment. You could be that moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Diana and I worked in secret. I drew diagrams of Whitmore's internal systems, explained their security protocols, identified weak points in their document management. Diana brought in a forensic accountant who'd been investigating financial crimes for 20 years, a former SEC investigator who'd quit in frustration over political interference, and surprisingly, a current Whitmore employee who'd been secretly documenting irregularities for years, but had been too afraid to come forward. That employee was Patricia, Richard's assistant. She met us at Diana's apartment on a Saturday, looking nothing like the polished executive assistant I'd known. In jeans and a sweater, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I've been his assistant for 15 years, she said, clutching a flash drive. "I've seen everything, every meeting, every call, every document that passes through his office. I knew what they were doing, but I have 2 kids in college and my husband has cancer. I couldn't afford to lose my job." "What changed?" Diana asked gently. Patricia looked at me. Watching them destroy Sarah. She was a good kid. Worked harder than any of them. Never played their games. When I saw Richard rehearsing his disappointment speech the night before they fired her, when I heard him and Victoria laughing about how easy it was to manipulate her, I couldn't anymore. I started recording. The flash drive contained 3 months of recordings. Richard and Victoria discussing the scheme in detail, phone calls with Meridian executives coordinating trades, even a conversation where Richard explicitly said, "We'll pin it on Coleman. She's perfect, ambitious enough to be believable, naive enough not to see it coming, and no family money for good lawyers." But the most damning recording was from the night before I was fired. Victoria's voice, clear and cold. "The beautiful thing is, she actually found the real pattern. We can use her own research against her, just twist it enough to make her look guilty. She handed us the rope to hang her with." Richard's response: "Make sure the evidence is airtight. I don't want another Marcus situation where questions linger. This time, it needs to be definitive." "Don't worry," Victoria had replied. "I've learned from our mistakes. Sarah trusts me completely. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. By the time she realizes what's happened, it'll be too late." Listening to that recording, I felt something break inside me. Not my spirit, that had already been shattered, but the last vestige of the naive girl who'd believed that hard work and integrity would always win. In its place, something harder crystallized. Not revenge exactly, but determination. "The Coleman women happened to life," Grandma Ruth always said. "It was time to happen to life." Diana's article was scheduled to run on a Tuesday morning, timed to hit just as the markets opened. But first, she wanted to give Richard and Victoria a chance to comment. It was journalism ethics, she explained, but also strategy. They'll panic. They'll make mistakes. They'll probably try to discredit you preemptively, which will only make them look worse when the recordings come out. She was right. Within hours of Diana contacting Whitmore and Associates for comment, my phone exploded with calls from reporters. Someone had leaked that I was spreading conspiracy theories and attempting to extort my former employer. A hastily written hit piece appeared on a financial blog, calling me a failed analyst turned fantasist and suggesting I might be mentally unstable. Victoria even called me directly, her voice honey-sweet with fake concern. "Sarah, darling, I heard you're going through a tough time. Maybe we can work something out. The firm might be willing to reconsider things if you just admit you made a mistake. We could say it was stress, temporary insanity. You could get help, and in a few years, when this all blows over, who knows? Everyone deserves a second chance. Is this call being recorded? I asked. A pause. Why would you ask that? Because I want to make sure there's evidence of you trying to manipulate me. Again. She hung up. The night before the article was set to publish, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my window, watching the city lights, thinking about all the other Sarah Colemans out there. Young people with big dreams and no connections, trying to make it in systems designed to exclude them. How many had been crushed like I almost was? How many had given up, accepted the narrative that they were failures, criminals, not good enough? At exactly 6 a.m., Diana's article went live. The headline read, "Exclusive. Recordings reveal years-long insider trading scheme at prestigious financial firm, multiple analysts framed for executives' crimes." The article was methodical, devastating, and irrefutable. Diana had laid out everything: the pattern of framed analysts, the recorded conversations, the financial evidence, statements from Patricia and 2 other whistleblowers who'd come forward after hearing about the investigation. She'd even tracked down Marcus Huang in South Korea and Jennifer Walsh in Ohio, both of whom had agreed to speak on record about their experiences. But the recordings were what made it undeniable. Diana had uploaded them to the Herald Tribune's website, and within an hour, they'd been downloaded thousands of times. Financial Twitter exploded. The hashtag #OshWhitmoreGate started trending. By 8 a.m., when the markets opened, Whitmore and Associates' stock price had dropped 30%. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, feeling strangely detached. Diana called to check on me, warning that things would get intense. She was right. By noon, there were 3 news vans outside my building, but this time they weren't calling me a criminal. They wanted to hear from the whistleblower who exposed Wall Street corruption. The SEC announced an investigation that afternoon. The FBI followed suit an hour later. Richard Whitmore released a statement calling the allegations baseless and defamatory, but his lawyers must have told him to stop talking after that because he went completely silent. Victoria tried a different approach, claiming she was also a victim, manipulated by Richard into participating. But the recordings made clear she was a willing and enthusiastic participant. The most satisfying moment came 3 days later. I was at Grandma Ruth's apartment in Queens, helping her with dinner, when the breaking news alert came through. FBI arrests 2 executives at Whitmore and Associates on federal fraud charges. The footage showed Richard and Victoria being led out of the building in handcuffs, using the same elevator I'd taken during my humiliation, walking across the same marble lobby where I'd seen my shame reflected. Victoria tried to hide her face, but Richard held his head high, still playing the part of the wronged executive. As they pushed him into the FBI vehicle, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Whitmore, do you have anything to say to Sarah Coleman?" He looked directly at the camera, and for a moment, I saw the real him. Not the paternal mentor, not the respected executive, but a man who'd built his empire on the destroyed careers of people he deemed expendable. "She knows what she did," he said. Even then, even caught red-handed, he couldn't admit the truth. The trials took 18 months. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail of how I'd been manipulated and framed. Victoria's lawyer tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, the testimony of 7 other former employees who'd come forward after the article. It all painted a picture of systematic fraud and abuse of power. Richard got 12 years in federal prison. Victoria got 8. 16 other executives were charged with various degrees of involvement. Whitmore and Associates dissolved within 6 months, its assets liquidated to pay settlements to defrauded clients and wrongfully terminated employees. I received a settlement too. Enough to pay off my student loans, buy Grandma Ruth a house with a garden like she'd always dreamed of, and start over. But money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that my name was cleared. The financial blogs that had called me a criminal now called me a hero. The NYU Alumni Association invited me to give the keynote speech at their Ethics in Business conference. But the call that meant the most came from Marcus Wong. It was 3 a.m. his time in Seoul, but he couldn't wait. "I've been living with this shame for 3 years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My family thought I'd disgraced them. My wife left me. I thought about ending it all so many times. You gave me my life back, Sarah. You gave us all our lives back." I thought about Diana's partner, the one who hadn't made it, who'd been crushed by the weight of false accusations. I thought about Jennifer Walsh, who'd sent me a handwritten letter thanking me for proving her innocence to her children. I thought about all the future analysts who would never have to go through what we did because the system had finally been exposed. A year after the article was published, I started my own financial consulting firm. Not a big corporate entity, but a small company focused on helping nonprofits and social enterprises manage their finances ethically and transparently. Patricia joined me as my operations manager. She'd been instrumental in the investigation and couldn't return to the corporate world even if she'd wanted to. We hired Marcus when he returned from South Korea, and Jennifer started working with us remotely from Ohio. We became a team of people who'd been broken by the system and rebuilt ourselves into something stronger. Our company motto, suggested by Grandma Ruth, was simple: integrity is not negotiable. Diana won a Pulitzer for her reporting. In her acceptance speech, she mentioned her late partner and all the whistleblowers who'd risked everything to expose the truth. "Journalism isn't just about reporting facts," she said. "It's about giving voice to those who've been silenced, power to those who've been crushed, and hope to those who've been told they don't matter." She called me the night before the speech to practice it. "Is it too much?" she asked. "It's perfect," I told her. "Every word." The last time I saw Victoria was at her sentencing. She looked smaller somehow, her designer suit replaced with a conservative dress that couldn't hide her defeat. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood and turned to look at me. "I taught you well," she said, a ghost of her old smile playing at her lips. "Maybe too well." "No," I replied, standing to face her. "You taught me to be strategic without integrity. Life taught me that integrity without strategy isn't enough either. But integrity with strategy? That's unstoppable." The judge sentenced her to 8 years, and as the bailiff led her away, I felt not satisfaction, but sadness. She'd been brilliant, talented, capable of so much good. But she'd chosen to use those gifts to destroy others for her own gain. What a waste. Richard never acknowledged his guilt, even after his conviction. In a jailhouse interview 2 years later, he still maintained that he'd been betrayed by employees I trusted, and that the whole situation was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by the media. The interviewer asked him about me specifically, and his response was telling. Sarah Coleman was nobody, a nobody who got lucky. I laughed when I saw that interview. He still didn't get it. I wasn't nobody. I was everybody. Every young person trying to make it honestly in a dishonest system. Every employee who'd been thrown under the bus by their boss. Every whistleblower who'd been called crazy for telling the truth. I was all of them, and they were all me. 5 years have passed since that morning when security escorted me out of Whitmore and Associates. My consulting firm now has 50 employees and offices in 3 cities. We've helped dozens of nonprofits optimize their financial operations, uncovered fraud at 2 major charities, and created a scholarship program for first-generation college students studying finance. But more importantly, we've changed the conversation. The Whitmore method has become business school shorthand for corporate scapegoating. Companies have implemented stronger whistleblower protections. The SEC created a task force specifically to investigate patterns of framing employees for executive crimes. I still get calls from people like I used to be, young analysts who've discovered something wrong and don't know what to do. I always take those calls. I tell them to document everything, to trust but verify, to remember that their integrity is worth more than any job. And if they find themselves being set up, I give them Diana's number. Last month, I was invited to speak at NYU's graduation ceremony. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of eager faces ready to take on the world, I thought about my own graduation day. How certain I'd been that hard work would be enough. How naive I'd been about the systems I was entering. You're going to face moments, I told them, where doing the right thing seems impossible, where the powerful people in your life will ask you to compromise your values for success, where you'll be punished for refusing to participate in corruption. In those moments, remember this: your integrity is not a weakness to be exploited. It's a strength that terrifies those who lack it. They will try to break you. They will try to blame you. They will try to make you believe you're nobody. But you're not nobody. You're everybody who's ever been silenced, everyone who's ever been framed, everyone who's ever been told their truth doesn't matter. And when you stand up, when you speak out, when you refuse to let them win, you're not just saving yourself, you're saving the next person they would have destroyed. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright with determination. "Miss Coleman," she said, "I just got an offer from one of the big firms. After hearing you speak, I'm wondering if I should take it." "Take it," I told her. "Go in with your eyes open. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And if you see something wrong, don't wait for someone else to fix it. Be the person who stands up. Be the person who speaks out. Be the person who changes things." She nodded, then asked, "Were you ever scared during all of it?" "Every single day," I admitted. But I learned something important. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't standing up to corruption, it's living with yourself if you don't. Grandma Ruth was in the audience that day, sitting in the front row in a new dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. At 91, she moved slower than she used to, but her spirit was as fierce as ever. After the speech, as we walked through Washington Square Park, she took my arm and said, "Your parents would be so proud, baby. You didn't just happen to life, you changed it." "I learned from the best," I told her. "No," she said, stopping to look me in the eyes. "You learned from the worst. Victoria, Richard, that whole corrupt system, they taught you what not to be, but who you became. That was all you, Sarah. That was always in you." Sometimes I think about the path not taken. What if I'd never found those patterns? What if I'd kept quiet when I did? What if Victoria hadn't betrayed me, and I'd slowly become complicit in their crimes, trading my integrity for success one small compromise at a time? Would I have become like them eventually? The thought haunts me. But then I remember Marcus, teaching financial literacy to underprivileged kids in Brooklyn now, using his story to show them that failure isn't always what it seems. I think about Jennifer, who went back to school and became a forensic accountant, helping other wrongfully accused people clear their names. I think about Patricia, who at 62 started a new career and found purpose she'd never had as Richard's assistant. We all emerged from our crucibles transformed, not unscarred. We carry those marks forever, but stronger. We learned that rock bottom can be a foundation if you're willing to build on it. We learned that the truth, while sometimes slow, is ultimately unstoppable. We learned that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy, it's about doing the right thing when it costs you everything. The financial world has changed since Whitmore fell. Not completely. There will always be those who choose greed over good, who see others as stepping stones rather than human beings. But there's more accountability now. More protection for whistleblowers, more consequences for those who abuse their power. Young analysts reach out to me regularly, sharing their stories, asking for advice. I tell them all the same thing. Your value isn't determined by your title, your salary, or your company's prestige. It's determined by your willingness to stand for something, even when standing costs you everything. The moment you forget that, the moment you trade your integrity for advancement, you've lost something worth more than any job. Last week I got an unexpected call. It was from someone at the Federal Bureau of Prisons informing me that Victoria had requested to add me to her visitor list. She wanted to see me. After 5 years of silence, she wanted to talk. I went. I don't know why exactly. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was just the need to look her in the eyes one more time and show her that she hadn't destroyed me. She looked older, grayer, smaller in her prison uniform. When she sat across from me in the visiting room, she was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I think about it every day. What I did to you. What I did to all of them." "And?" I asked. "And I'm sorry. I know that means nothing. I know it changes nothing. But I wanted you to know. You were the best analyst I ever worked with. You were everything I should have been, but was too corrupted to be. I destroyed you because you reminded me of what I'd lost in myself." "You didn't destroy me," I said quietly. "You tried. You almost succeeded. But here's the thing about truth, Victoria. It's like water. You can dam it, divert it, even pollute it. But eventually, it finds a way through." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I have 3 more years. When I get out, no one will hire me. My husband divorced me. My kids won't speak to me. I'll be starting over at 52 with nothing." "I started over at 24 with less than nothing," I reminded her. "With my reputation destroyed and my career in ashes. If I could rebuild, so can you. The question is whether you'll rebuild with integrity this time." "Would you hire me?" she asked, and I could see she was serious. "When I get out? I know it's insane to ask, but no," I said firmly. "I wouldn't. Not because I don't believe in second chances, but because trust, once shattered like you shattered mine, can't be fully rebuilt. But—" "Victoria, there are other ways to redeem yourself. Teach, write, warn others about the path you took. Use your story to prevent others from making your mistakes." As I left the prison, I felt something lift from my shoulders. Not forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that, might never be. But release. The chapter was closed. The story was told. The truth had won. That night, I had dinner with Diana to tell her about the visit. She's working on a book about the whole scandal now, with a focus on the systemic issues that allow such corruption to flourish. "You know what strikes me most?" she said over wine. "It's not that they were evil. It's that they were ordinary. Ordinary people who made a series of small compromises until they were capable of enormous cruelty." "The banality of corporate evil," I suggested, and she laughed. "Exactly. That's what makes your story so important, Sarah. You were ordinary too, but you chose differently. In the moment when it mattered most, you chose truth over comfort, integrity over advancement, right over easy. That's what makes someone extraordinary. Not their talents or their achievements, but their choices when those choices cost them everything." I thought about her words on the subway ride home, watching the tired faces of workers heading back to their lives. How many of them were facing their own ethical dilemmas? How many were being asked to compromise their values for a paycheck? How many would stand up if they saw something wrong? The truth is, we'll never know until the moment comes. You can't predict courage. You can't rehearse integrity. You can only hope that when your moment arrives, and it will, in ways small or large, you'll remember that your worth isn't determined by those who have power over you. It's determined by the choices you make when no one is watching, the stands you take when standing is dangerous, the truth you tell when lies would be easier. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a young analyst at another firm. "Ms. Coleman, I've discovered something at my company. I'm scared. Can we talk?" I texted back immediately. "Yes, you're not alone. Let's meet tomorrow." Because that's the real victory, not the settlements or the vindication or the justice, satisfying as those were. The real victory is that the next Sarah Coleman, the next Marcus Huang, the next Jennifer Walsh, they have someone to call. They have proof that speaking up while dangerous is possible. They have evidence that the truth, however buried, can surface. The Coleman women happen to life, Grandma Ruth always said. But I've learned something she didn't teach me. Sometimes happening to life means letting life happen to you first, letting it break you down to your foundations, so you can rebuild yourself into someone who can truly make a difference. I was fired and disgraced. A journalist called, wanting to hear the real story. And in telling that story, in refusing to accept the narrative they'd written for me, I didn't just save myself. I helped save everyone who came before me and everyone who would come after. The powerful will always try to silence the powerless. The corrupt will always try to frame the innocent. The system will always try to protect itself at the expense of individuals. But as long as there are people willing to stand up, speak out, and tell the truth, as long as there are journalists like Diana, whistleblowers like Patricia, and survivors like all of us who refuse to disappear quietly, the truth will find its way. It may take time, it may cost everything, but in the end, the truth doesn't just set you free, it sets everyone free. That's the story I wanted you to hear, not just because it's mine, but because it might be yours too in some way. Maybe you've been falsely accused. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted. Maybe you've had to watch the guilty prosper while you suffered for their crimes. If that's you, know this: your story isn't over. The chapter where they win isn't the last chapter unless you let it be. Stand up, speak out, find your Diana Price, your Patricia, your community of people who've been where you are. Document everything. Trust carefully, but don't stop trusting entirely. And remember that integrity isn't weakness. It's the strength that terrifies those who lack it. The truth may be slow, but it's relentless. It may be quiet, but it's persistent. It may be buried, but it's not dead. And sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept a lie for the whole house of cards to come tumbling down. I was nobody, Richard said. He was right, in a way. I was nobody special, just a young woman from Queens trying to make it in a world that wasn't built for her. But that's exactly why my story matters. Because if nobody can stand up to power and win, then anybody can. Everybody can. The morning sun is rising over Manhattan as I finish telling you this story. I can see the building where Whitmore and Associates used to be from my office window. It's a wellness center now, offering mental health services to financial industry workers dealing with stress and ethical dilemmas. There's something poetic about that transformation. A place that once destroyed souls, now trying to heal them. My assistant just knocked, reminding me I have a meeting with a new client, a small environmental nonprofit that needs help managing a sudden influx of donations. This is my life now, using the skills I learned in the belly of the beast to help organizations that are trying to make the world better. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I earned by refusing to let others define my story. Before I go, I want to leave you with one final thought. There's a quote I keep on my desk, something Grandma Ruth said to me the day after the FBI arrested Richard and Victoria. "Baby, they tried to bury you. What they didn't know was that you were a seed. We're all seeds. Every one of us who's been pushed down, stepped on, buried by those who thought we were finished. But seeds do something remarkable when they're buried. They grow. They push through the darkness, break through the soil, and reach for the light. And when they finally bloom, they're stronger for having fought their way up. So if you're in the darkness right now, if you've been buried by lies or betrayal or systemic injustice, remember, you're not dead. You're planted. And when you finally break through, and you will, if you keep pushing, you won't just survive. You'll bloom. And thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.